Hello and welcome to part 2 of the corner applique preparation guide for the English Country Garden quilts by Hexadoodle Quilts. So we're now getting ready to place all of our shapes onto our background fabric. So for this we need the vine and leaves template that we produced earlier. We still have our paper backing on that. We need some glue based it by Roxanne's for holding my shapes onto the background. Some spray starch, because I'm going to be removing all of my papers before I do the applique. I'm also going to need the applique layout guide, which is different to the tracing guide. You'll notice we have these orange areas here to show where to place our flowers. I also have my background fabric, which I've got ready and prepared following the instructions in the pattern. We've folded it into quarters and pressed it to get our central registration lines, and we've also folded it diagonally and pressed to get our on-point registration lines. So before we do any more, I'm just going to be removing the papers from my Lupin flowers so that I can applique and quilt all at the same time. And I'm going to lightly spray the back of my flower with a regular spray starch. And if you have something like Best Press, by all means use that. I just use regular spray starch. It's what I have on hand. So a light spray, we're going to let that just sink in, and then we're going to press our flowers again and remove the papers. You'll notice my papers have little holes punched in them. That's to make it easier for me to remove those papers in a moment. So now the starch has had time to sink in, we're just going to press these gently with a hot iron, but no steam. Doing this so that our shapes keep those nice crisp edges when we remove the papers. When we're pressing, we're not ironing. We don't want to disturb any of our seam allowances. We're going to allow those time to cool fully, and then we're going to remove the papers from the... Starting with this one, I'm going to just insert a small crochet hook, or you could use a stiletto, something with a blunt point, not too sharp. We just want to go in and loosen any glue if we've been glue basting. Obviously, if you have thread basted your shapes, there's no need to loosen the seam allowance, but you will want to remove any thread basting that's gone through the papers. So I'm just loosening off any glue that I've used by basting here. And then I can insert my stiletto into that hole that I've punched and gently remove the paper. Taking care not to move or disturb the seam allowance too much. There we go. And we're going to repeat that for all of these shapes on this flower. Okay, coming up to the last shape now, I'm going to remove that last paper from the back by Lupin. We can set those aside and use those again for another project another time. So what I'm going to do now is just very gently, I'm going to press down all of these seam allowances, preserving the nice crisp edges. And there we go. Now I'm only pressing from the back of my flower. I am not pressing from the front because I don't want to press an impression of those seam allowances through to the front of my flower. So I'm going to repeat this process now for the 2 remaining Lupin flowers for this block. So we have our 3 Lupin flowers now, all with their papers removed. Now it's time to start layering up our appliqué. The first thing we need is our appliqué layout guide. I'm going to just lay that on my pressing surface in the centre, and I'm going to grab some sticky tape so that I can just stick this down in the four corners to stop it moving around now whilst I position my shapes. So it's just a temporary hole. Put a piece of tape there, and I'm going to put a piece of tape on the opposite corner, and that should stop it from moving around. Okay, now let's grab our background fabric. This has already been pressed and folded. I've pressed and folded it into quarters, both horizontally and vertically, and also diagonally. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the dotted registration lines on my pattern to position my background fabric. Now hopefully the lines should be thick enough to see through your pattern. If you're using a dark background, you'll want to watch the tutorial on how to transfer an appliqué design to a dark background, and that will explain how to use the prick and pounce method for transferring your design to your dark background fabrics. So I'm going to grab a pin cushion, because once I get this lined up, I'm going to want to stop it from moving around also. So I'm just looking here, checking that we've got the registration lines here are lining up. They're lining up through the centre of the block, and that these diagonals are also lining up with these folded registration lines on my block. And once you're happy you've got it in the correct position, just use a few pins to pin it to your pressing surface and stop it from moving around. And I'm pinning away to the edges, away from this area here where we're going to be laying our pieces. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to actually lay down my vine and leaves. As I mentioned in the previous video, these stems are oversized because this particular vine and leaf configuration we're going to use in all of our corner blocks. So they are oversized because some of the blocks are smaller than the others. So for this one, you can see the stem extends well into the area where the lupin is going to sit. So if you want to, you can trim off that excess now and just leave 1/4 inch underneath your lupin. So just looking there, I'm going to trim off the excess stem so it doesn't show through my lupin flower. There we go. So now I'm going to peel the backing paper off from my appliqué. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky to get a hold of. It doesn't want to come away. So a nice easy way to do this is just to turn it over, and when you've got a large area like this big leaf, is just take a pin and score the paper. And scoring through the paper is going to make it much easier for you to get hold of that paper backing and peel it away. So we're going to peel that off now. There we go. And you can see on this one I've got a shiny side. That's the fusible, that's the glue. So very carefully we're just going to position this back on the background fabric using the layout guide underneath to help me position my leaves and my stems. There we go. And then once you're happy it's in the correct position, take your iron and, with the settings laid out by your particular manufacturer depending on your product, adhere the appliqué in place. I'm just pressing gently, I'm not moving the iron around here, I'm just pressing gently, making sure that it adheres well to the background. allow it to cool, and if you want to, just check with your fingernail, make sure that everything has stuck down nicely and there's no bits lifting. For example here, look, it's starting to lift, so I need to press that again to make sure it stays in position. So if you want to now, you can take this to your sewing machine and you can stitch around the outside, either with a decorative stitch or a straight stitch, and attach your vines and leaves to your background fabric. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to baste my Lupin flowers to the background, and I'm actually going to be quilting and appliquing at the same time with this block. So turn your flower over. This is the wrong side of my flower. I'm not sure if you can see, but this is where all the seam allowances are. I'm going to turn that over, and then using small dots of the glue based it, I'm going to just pop those on the back. We don't need a lot of glue to hold this, and you only need small little dots all the way around the perimeter. There we go. And again, if you look at your layout guide, you don't have the full flower, but you have enough of the flower available for you to be able to line up your Lupin accurately. So carefully, we're going to take that. I'm going to line up this bottom edge with the flower on the layout guide, and then push it down and allow that glue to dry. I'm going to repeat that for the remaining 2 flowers. Once the glue is dried, you can remove the pins from your background fabric. Carefully lift your block up from the layout template, and there we go. That is your corner block all ready now. You can hand applique or machine applique your blooms down, and then follow the instructions in the pattern, create your quilt sandwich and quilt your block as you wish.